On the evening of March 5th, 1770, a fight occurred in the streets of Boston that would change the course of American history forever. A fight so significant that it would launch two previously united countries into war and would inspire one of the most groundbreaking revolutions of all time. This fight is known as the Boston Massacre. Before this major turning point in the American Revolution, the colonies were in a state of turmoil. As the amount of colonial resistance to the encroaching enforcement of British rule increased, so did British retaliation. By the time the fighting broke out, there were 4 regiments of British troops stationed in Boston to enforce the Townshend Acts. The presence of British troops in the city became increasingly unwelcome, and it gave the colonists a lessened sense of independence. There was also a growing level of mistrust between the colonists and the British, as there had been several minor clashes between the soldiers and the patriots in the months leading up to this event. However, it is important to point out that no real blood was shed before this fateful night. The turning point of the revolution, marking the transition from non-belligerent controversy to violence and death, was soon to come. The date is March 5th, 1770. In the distance, an enraged patriot mob of about 50 can be seen making their way toward the customs office in Boston, Massachusetts. As the mob approaches the British soldiers standing guard, they begin to torment them by throwing rocks and shouting out jeering insults. Their main gripe is about unfair taxation, and their goal is to ensure that their disdain for the British rule is made clear in public. While under this minor attack, a British soldier is bumped by one of the colonists as the crowd grows larger and rowdier. Instead of handling the matter rationally, he fires into the square, immediately killing an African American named Crispus Attucks, who now is considered the first martyr of American independence. Upon 4 more shots aimlessly fired into the crowd, more American lives are taken: Samuel Gray, a rope maker; James Caldwell, a sailor; Samuel Maverick, a 17-year-old apprentice; and Patrick Carr, a leather worker and Irish immigrant. The so-called massacre shifted the revolution into gear and inspired the colonists to take up arms to defend their independence, thus commencing the American Revolution. According to the Sons of Liberty, the Boston Massacre was just a battle for American liberty, and it truly was. The Boston Massacre was the single most important precipitant of the American Revolution because it was the first real battle to take place on American soil between the colonists and the British. Hostility finally manifested itself in bloodshed, and lives were lost for the cause of independence. After this night, a town meeting was called demanding the removal of the British and the trial of British Captain Thomas Preston and his men for murder. At the trial, John Adams and Hosea Quincy defended the British, leading to their acquittal and release. Samuel Quincy and Robert Tree Payne were the attorneys for the prosecution. Preston and 6 of his men were acquitted, 2 others were found guilty of manslaughter, punished, and discharged from the army. Shortly thereafter, there was an explosion of propaganda especially designed to ignite the dull flames that had been flickering within the colonial patriots for so long. Images of ruthless British soldiers firing into a crowd of seemingly innocent colonists appeared in patriot newspapers in every colonial city, thereby suggesting to all that the fight has begun. In the eyes of the colonists, this event was the last straw. There was no turning back after colonial lives had been so malevolently taken by the Americans' own protectorates. Despite the best efforts of the governing authorities to quell anti-British sentiments, such as immediately removing the troops from British and postponing the trial by several months, the net result was the increase of support for the independence. Testimonies were later published from witnesses of the event, one of which was from Robert Patterson. I, Robert Patterson of lawful age, testify and say that on Monday night the 5th current, being at Captain McNeil's at the north end, heard the bells ring and fire cried. I immediately ran till I got into Royal Exchange Lane, it being about 3:15 o'clock. I saw a number of people in the lane. I asked what was the matter. They told me that the soldiers were going to kill all the inhabitants. I immediately went through the lane and stood in the middle of King Street about 10 or 11 minutes, the sentinel then standing leaning against his box, when I saw an officer with 7 or 8 soldiers coming from the main guard, clearing the way with their guns and bayonets, go below the sentinel box, and turn up and place themselves around it, facing the people standing opposite Royal Exchange Lane. When I saw a man with a light-coloured shirt out at the custom house door, the door being wide open, there standing with his shoulders against the side. Then I heard the officer order the soldiers to load, which they did. After that I heard the people say, "Damn you, why don't you fire?" And about a minute after I heard the word fire, but from whom I cannot say, which the soldiers did. Looking around, I saw 3 men lay dead in the snow being at that time near foot deep. Immediately they loaded again. The people then gave 3 cheers and cried out, "Let's go out upon them and prevent their firing," upon which they put on their hats and advanced towards them. My hand being raised to put on my hat, still advancing towards the soldiers, the sentinel up with his gun and fired, the balls going through my lower right arm and my hand immediately falling, and finding myself wounded, made the best of my way home with help, and further I say not. Overall, the Boston Massacre served as history's fulcrum, whereby the Americans' resistance to British rule transitioned into the American Revolution. The shots fired by the British symbolized so much more than a simple street fight. It signaled to the colonists that they would have to go to war in order to achieve their independence. This proved to the revolutionaries that there was no use traveling down the peaceful route any longer. The British made it evident that they were prepared for a battle, and the colonists took that offer in the name of liberty.